So I was bored and I recently got my hands on Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters as an audio. And it inspired me to write this, which is what if Doctor Who, the Silurian Candidate, was a Target novelization. And then it got me thinking, what if it was an audio of the Target novelization? So I decided to do the prologue that I wrote up for Doctor Who and the Silurian Candidate on audio. And here it is. Hope you guys enjoy. The Changing Face of Doctor Who. The cover image portrays the seventh Doctor Who, whose physical appearance was altered after his previous incarnation died while the TARDIS was crash landing on a planet called Lacertia. Doctor Who and the Silurian Candidate by Brian Corrigan. Read by Brian Corrigan. Chapter 1. Prologue. Apocalypse. The Triad had finally made sure all the communities had gone into suspended animation. Now it was their turn, just as the planetoid was upon them. The wind roared and the seas crashed upon blood-red shores as the sun set in the distance. They didn't have long. It was now or never. The Triad and a scientist ran up the stone steps of the capital. The four entered the building and went down to the lower levels of the city. Avox, one of the Triad, looked to her left as they entered the relatively new shelter. She saw her favorite fighting animal's hibernation pod. She pressed her hand against it.
"I'll see you soon,"
she whispered.
"Avox, we must go,"
yelled Spenitus. She hesitated for a moment, then followed her husband. The scientist, whose name was Zorvok, led them to the hibernation pods, every once in a while saying something along the lines of,
"Quickly now,"
and,
"We must hurry."
when they finally reached the chamber, Zorvok was pushed aside by Spenitus. Avox patted the scientist and gave him a handshake. The two of them stepped into their respective pods. The third Triad member, Chordok, stood over Zorvok's shoulder.
"Are you sure you know how to work the—"
Zorvok cut him off.
"Yes, I have it completely memorized, Chief Scientist Chordok. Now I must insist you get in your pod immediately."
And with that, Chordok walked over to his pod, and the Triad were sealed in. Zorvok walked back out into the city and moved towards the beach. The planetoid was visibly becoming closer. He shut his eyes and waited for the end to come. He began reassuring himself as he waited for the inevitable pain. He told himself he did his duty for those he knew, loved, and served, and he felt happiness. He was ready to accept his fate. However, it didn't come the way he expected. When Zorvok opened his eyes, the planetoid had stopped moving.
"Peculiar,"
he thought. He suddenly became enraged that nothing had happened. The sea calmed down and the stars were beginning to shine. He had sealed his race away, and now he was the only one who was going to live. The event that would have awoken them, the atmosphere being torn away from Earth and returning a few years later, was never going to happen now as the planetoid never got close enough. What was it all for? Why couldn't the planetoid have just taken the atmosphere and him with it? He was about to start sulking when suddenly a roaring sound grew louder. He looked back at the sky. It had gone red as a giant burning spaceship began tumbling down towards the Earth. Zorvok watched in amazement as the ship crashed into a city hundreds of miles away. The explosion was beautifully horrifying. However, Zorvok felt no fear as the buildings of the capital came tumbling down as the shock wave ripped through them. Just as he felt no fear as the shock wave ripped through him.